The veteran tank crew made it clear they didn't respect their new young commander, whispering about book learning versus real experience every time he gave an order. What they didn't know was that Lieutenant Marcus Thompson had spent 3 years studying under the world's greatest military strategists, developing tactics that Pentagon generals called the future of armored combat. Welcome to Stories from Us. Before we begin this powerful story of hidden genius and military strategic superiority, tell me in the comments, what city are you watching from today? And if you believe stories like this deserve to be heard, hit that subscribe button. These moments matter more than you know. At Fort Carson, within the 2nd Armored Brigade Combat Team's 1st Battalion, Lieutenant Marcus Thompson was 24 years old and the newly assigned commander of an M1A2 Abrams main battle tank. Fresh from West Point with perfect theoretical knowledge but zero real combat experience, Marcus represented everything that worried seasoned tankers about the modern Army's emphasis on education over battlefield experience. His tank crew consisted of 4 veteran soldiers who collectively possessed over 40 years of armored warfare experience. Staff Sergeant Davis, 32 years old with 12 years of military service, had served as a tank commander through 2 deployments in Iraq and 1 in Afghanistan, operating in real combat conditions where mistakes meant death. Sergeant First Class Anderson controlled the gunner position with 10 years of experience and knew every technical specification of the 120mm main gun. Specialist Mitchell served as the driver, while Private First Class Walker operated as the loader, both bringing years of experience in tank operations and maintenance. When Marcus first arrived at their motor pool bay, the crew's reception was professionally polite but noticeably cool. Davis, in particular, made his skepticism apparent without crossing the line into insubordination. "So we've got ourselves a college boy," Davis remarked as Marcus introduced himself to the crew. "Hope you learned something useful in those West Point classrooms, sir." Anderson's concerns were more direct. "Sir, if you don't mind me asking, have you ever been in actual combat operations? Real tank warfare under fire?" "No, Sergeant," Marcus replied honestly. "This will be my first operational assignment with an active armored unit." Davis and Anderson exchanged meaningful glances. Another bookworm officer with no practical experience was about to learn the hard way that commanding a 70-ton war machine required more than classroom theory. During the first several weeks of Marcus's command, the crew questioned virtually every tactical decision he made. During training exercises, Davis consistently offered unsolicited suggestions that highlighted Marcus's inexperience with barely concealed frustration. "Sir, permission to speak freely," Davis would say after Marcus outlined a maneuver. "That approach you're suggesting, in real combat conditions, it would expose our flanks and get us killed. Maybe the textbooks say something different, but field experience teaches you that survival comes first." Anderson frequently added his own concerns about Marcus's tactical choices. "Sir, the enemy doesn't follow the same rules they teach at the academy. In Afghanistan, we learned that adaptability matters more than following doctrine." Marcus listened patiently to every critique, acknowledging their concerns and adjusting his approach when their experience clearly outweighed his theoretical knowledge. But internally, his frustration was mounting. The standard training exercises they conducted didn't create situations that would allow him to demonstrate his true capabilities, and the crew's skepticism was becoming a barrier to effective unit cohesion. What none of the crew members knew was that Marcus possessed a background that extended far beyond the typical West Point education. While at the military academy, he had not only graduated first in his class with a perfect academic record, but had also been selected for an extraordinary opportunity that was offered to fewer than 5 cadets per decade, admission to the Army War College's Advanced Strategic Studies program while still an undergraduate. This program, typically reserved for lieutenant colonels and full colonels with 20 years of experience, had accepted Marcus based on his exceptional analytical abilities and innovative thinking about modern warfare. For 3 years, while completing his regular West Point coursework, Marcus had studied under some of the most brilliant military minds in American history, developing strategic concepts that challenged conventional armored warfare doctrine. His master's thesis, titled Asymmetric Tank Warfare in Urban Environments, Redefining Armor Tactics for 21st Century Combat, had revolutionized Pentagon thinking about how armored units should operate in modern conflict zones. The thesis presented tactical innovations that combined traditional armor principles with unconventional warfare techniques, creating hybrid strategies that could defeat numerically superior enemies through superior positioning, coordination, and psychological manipulation. General Patricia Hayes, a legendary figure in armored warfare who had served as Marcus's thesis advisor, had described him as a once-in-a-generation tactical mind whose innovations will reshape how we think about armored combat. The Pentagon had classified his thesis at the highest levels and incorporated his concepts into NATO armored warfare doctrine. But Marcus's name had been removed from all public documents to protect his identity for future operations. Despite possessing this extraordinary background, Marcus chose not to share these credentials with his crew. He believed that respect should be earned through performance rather than reputation, and he wanted his soldiers to trust his leadership abilities based on results rather than academic achievements. The opportunity to prove himself came during the third week of his assignment when Battalion Commander Lieutenant Colonel Jackson announced a major training exercise that would test every unit in the brigade. Operation Iron Thunder would be the largest and most realistic war game conducted at Fort Carson in over 5 years, featuring multiple tank companies operating against each other using the latest equipment and tactics. "This is the real deal, soldiers," Colonel Jackson explained during the briefing. "We're testing new operational concepts against near-peer adversaries using scenarios based on current global threat assessments. The winning units will receive priority consideration for deployment assignments and advancement opportunities." Davis listened to the announcement with growing excitement, seeing it as an opportunity to demonstrate the value of experience over theory. "Sir, this is our chance to show what real tank warfare looks like," he told Marcus. "I hope you're ready for some serious action." Marcus simply smiled. "I'm ready, Sergeant." In preparation for Operation Iron Thunder, Marcus developed a comprehensive tactical plan that differed dramatically from conventional armored warfare doctrine. Instead of relying on the direct assault and overwhelming firepower strategies that characterized traditional tank operations, his approach emphasized mobility, deception, and coordinated strikes that would exploit enemy expectations and psychological vulnerabilities. When Marcus presented his strategy during the crew planning session, the reaction was immediate skepticism. "Sir," Davis said carefully, "this approach is highly unconventional. You're proposing hit-and-run tactics and coordinated retreats. Tanks aren't designed for guerrilla warfare." Anderson added his own concerns. "And this level of coordination with infantry units and air support, it's extremely complex. What happens when communications break down or the timeline gets disrupted?" Marcus patiently explained his reasoning. "Modern warfare isn't about brute force and frontal assaults anymore. It's about intelligence, adaptability, and achieving tactical surprise. We're going to think and operate differently than our opponents expect." The crew remained skeptical, but orders were orders, and they prepared to execute Marcus's unconventional battle plan. When Operation Iron Thunder commenced, Marcus's tank was assigned to Blue Force, competing against Red Force in a complex urban warfare scenario designed to simulate fighting in a hostile city environment. The objective was to control strategic points throughout the operational area while denying the enemy access to critical infrastructure and supply routes. On the first day of the exercise, conventional Blue Force tanks that used traditional frontal assault tactics suffered heavy simulated losses. Red Force had established well-defended positions and was easily repelling direct attacks using standard anti-armor techniques and superior positioning. Marcus implemented a completely different approach based on the asymmetric warfare principles he had developed in his thesis. Instead of engaging in direct confrontation, he maneuvered his tank through unexpected routes, established coordination with infantry units that other tank commanders had ignored, and began executing hit-and-run attacks that disrupted enemy operations without exposing his unit to concentrated return fire. "Sir, we're moving away from the main battle," Davis observed with confusion as Marcus directed their tank along a route that seemed to avoid contact with enemy forces. The other tanks are engaging directly with the Red Force positions. Trust me, Sergeant, Marcus replied calmly. We're going to hit them where they don't expect us. Marcus's first tactical move demonstrated the brilliance of his strategic thinking. While the Red Force main battle group was occupied with frontal engagements, Marcus executed a flanking maneuver that allowed his tank to strike enemy supply lines and communication nodes, creating chaos in the Red Force rear areas and forcing them to divide their attention between multiple threats. Davis, monitoring the battlefield through his commander's scope, couldn't hide his amazement. Holy shit, sir. We just took out their primary ammunition depot and communications relay. How did you know those targets would be positioned there? Intelligence analysis and pattern recognition, Sergeant, Marcus explained. If you understand how your enemy thinks, you can predict where they'll place their critical assets. On the second day of the exercise, Marcus escalated his tactical complexity, coordinating simultaneous attacks with multiple tank units, disrupting enemy communications through electronic warfare techniques, and implementing psychological operations designed to create confusion and fear among opposing forces. Anderson, operating the tank's sophisticated targeting systems, found himself impressed by the precision of Marcus's target selection. Sir, these engagement priorities are perfect. You're hitting exactly the right targets in the optimal sequence to maximize battlefield impact. It's all about understanding the bigger strategic picture, Sergeant, Marcus replied. Every action we take should contribute to achieving our overall objectives, not just winning individual engagements. By the third day of Operation Iron Thunder, Marcus's revolutionary tactics had achieved their full effect. Red Force units were completely disoriented, unable to maintain their defensive positions or coordinate effective counterattacks. Blue Force achieved an overwhelming victory, and Marcus's tank unit was recognized as the most valuable performer in the entire exercise. Following the conclusion of the war games, Colonel Jackson personally sought out Marcus to discuss his extraordinary performance. Lieutenant Thompson, that was some of the most innovative tactical thinking I've seen in 20 years of armored warfare, the colonel said. Where did you learn those maneuvers? They're not part of any doctrine I'm familiar with. Army War College Advanced Strategic Studies program, sir, Marcus replied. I specialized in asymmetric armored warfare theory and urban combat applications. Colonel Jackson's expression shifted from curiosity to amazement. War College? At your age? That program is typically reserved for senior field grade officers. Yes, sir. I was accepted based on my research in innovative tactical applications and strategic analysis. Davis and the rest of the crew, who had been standing nearby during this conversation, heard every word and realized the magnitude of their mistake in underestimating their young commander. Davis approached Marcus with obvious embarrassment. Sir, the Army War College? You're talking about the institution where generals and colonels study advanced strategy? Yes, Sergeant. And you wrote research on tank warfare that was accepted by that program. I developed new tactical concepts for asymmetric armored operations in urban environments. The Pentagon has classified my work for incorporation into future doctrine. Anderson's mouth fell open in shock. Sir, we had no idea about your background. We assumed you were just another fresh officer with no practical experience. I wanted to earn your respect through performance rather than credentials, Marcus explained. But I understand that your concerns about inexperienced leadership were completely valid given what you knew about me. From that day forward, the crew's attitude toward Marcus underwent a complete transformation. They began to see him not just as their commanding officer, but as a tactical genius whose innovations could revolutionize how they approached armored warfare. Davis came to Marcus privately later that week. Sir, I owe you a sincere apology. I judged you based on your age and apparent lack of field experience, but you've demonstrated leadership and strategic thinking that's beyond anything I've encountered in my career. No apology necessary, Sergeant, Marcus replied. Your experience and practical skills were essential in executing those tactics successfully. What we accomplished was the result of teamwork between theoretical innovation and practical expertise. Within a month of Operation Iron Thunder, Marcus's tactical innovations were being implemented at the battalion level, and Pentagon observers arrived at Fort Carson to evaluate his methods for potential incorporation into official Army doctrine. Marcus was promoted to first lieutenant and received orders for a special assignment as an advanced tactics instructor at the Army War College, while his crew received commendations and assignments to train other units in the new tactical approaches. During their farewell gathering, Davis reflected on what he had learned. "Sir, it's been an honor serving under your command. You taught us that real strength in modern warfare comes from intelligence and innovation, not just from experience and firepower. And you taught me that brilliant theory means nothing without soldiers who have the skill and dedication to execute it flawlessly under pressure," Marcus responded. Marcus Thompson never needed rank to be a leader, never needed age to demonstrate wisdom, and never needed to announce his credentials to prove his worth. He found excellence in the combination of knowledge and humility, whether developing strategic theory in war college classrooms or transforming those theories into life-saving action on simulated battlefields. Sometimes the most powerful stories aren't about what people accomplish when everyone knows their background. They're about how they carry genius quietly, how they earn respect through performance, and how they transform knowledge into action that protects the lives of those who serve under them. They're about the brilliant strategists who walk among us, carrying extraordinary capabilities without ever feeling the need to announce their achievements. So now I ask you, have you ever met someone like Marcus Thompson? Someone whose youth concealed incredible expertise, whose quiet confidence masked world-class knowledge, whose actions spoke louder than any credentials could? Share their story in the comments. Tell us how they taught you that true leadership comes from competence rather than age, that genius often comes in unexpected packages, and that the most effective leaders are those who prove themselves through results rather than reputation. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, subscribe to help us honor the hidden geniuses and military strategists who deserve to be remembered. We'll see you in the next story. And until then, remember, the next time you're tempted to underestimate a young professional based on their apparent lack of experience, look a little closer. You might be in the presence of an extraordinary mind whose innovations could change everything you think you know about excellence.